welcome to B Shifter. John Vance here. On this podcast, Josh Bloom and I will be visiting with Colerain Township, Ohio Fire Chief Alan Walls. Chief Walls is going to discuss the tragic line of duty deaths of Captain Robin Broxterman and Firefighter Brian Schira on April 4th, 2008. We'll review some of their recovery process and how 14 years later that incident continues to shape and refine their department's operations, as well as impacting the entire fire service. We'll also talk a little bit about Colerain's implementation of Blue Card. Glad you're here for this conversation on B Shifter. All right, we're rolling. Chief Alan Walls, thanks for being with us today. We appreciate you spending some time with B Shifters. First of all, give us a little background on the Colerain Township Fire Department and where the department is today and the profile of the department, and then we'll get a little more background on some incidents that have happened there.
Okay. Well, first of all, thank you for having me. It's truly humbling and quite an honor and privilege to be on with you all. As far as Colerain Township, we're a suburb on the northwest side of Cincinnati, sometimes known as the Northwest Connection. We have about 60,000 residents. Last year, we made 11,333 calls. We have 5 fire stations, cover about 44 square miles, and we kind of cover, urban, suburban, and rural. In terms of the township, so about 15% is non-hydrated. So we staff 5 paramedic engine companies, a ladder company, a heavy rescue company. We have 2 water tankers, between 4 and 6 ALS transport units, and then a cadre of support staff. And so I guess you could say we're the second busiest fire department in Hamilton County outside of the city of Cincinnati. And I think, what drew me to Colerain was training and education and continuous improvement. I think that, we as an organization have always strived to not just be happy with the best practice, but to look for the next practice.
And what is the profile of the department today as far as your personnel makeup? How many people do you have?
So we have approximately 150. So we're a combination fire department. We have career and part-time. Our staffing is 34 per day. That's 26 full-time and 8 part-time. And then our administrative staff includes EMS captain, training captain, code enforcement, and then 2 assistant chiefs and a fire chief. And then we have our own fleet maintenance division as well.
And what's your history been with your department and incident management? How far back's that go? And what have you traditionally done at Colerain for incident management?
So in conversation with Chief Smith, and I got to give him credit here because Chief Smith was a fire chief from 1987 to about 2015. And in conversation with him today, because I wanted to understand that history, our first incursion in incident management began in the 80s, primarily driven by Brunacini's Fireground Command series in Fire Chief magazine. They formally adopted Fireground Command around 1987 during Chief Smith's stint at the Executive Fire Officer Program, where he met and became close friends with Chuck Kime, who was an assistant chief of the Phoenix Fire Department. And moving forward then, Chief Smith believes that Dayton Fire Department and Colerain were the first departments in the region to formally adopt a system by a few years ahead of anyone else. Shortly thereafter, then Hamilton County Fire Chiefs adopted Fireground Command, and here we are today with the adoption of Blue Card a year ago, which I think was the obvious progression in the management of incidents here in Colerain Township.
2008, your department suffered 2 line of duty deaths, and an incident that we've all studied through the NIOSH report and various other means since it happened. For those not familiar with that incident, bring us up to speed on that call and just start us off on what happened that day.
Okay. So in short, for those that don't know, we were originally dispatched to a smoke detector activation and carbon monoxide alarm activation that ended up being a working basement fire. That initial response brought 2 engines, a ladder, and a battalion chief to it. There was a delay in notification as far as it being a working fire. Upon Engine 102's arrival, the captain and then two firefighters stretched the line to the front door off the side and began an offensive attack. In the course of doing so, Captain Robin Broxterman and Firefighter Brian Schira fell through the floor into the basement and tragically died in the line of duty. That incident in of itself is as tragic as it was, and still is, in the sense that it's almost 14 years, and there are those here at Colerain who still suffer from the events of that day, as well as the families. It was also a defining moment in the sense that all of those years of adopting a formalized system and training and practicing and being prepared for something of that magnitude, came to fruition. And, we were able to hold the line, keep, the incident in check, manage it appropriately, and eventually recover Brian and Robin. And so, I think in those incidents, there's a probability or a possibility without, training and a formalized system for it to leap out of control. But with the strong incident commander and Battalion Chief Randy Ellert getting a system in place, being behind the 8 ball a little bit to begin with, in light of the fact, we had 2 engines, a ladder, the battalion, and me there initially, with half of the first 2 company missing. It could have gotten worse. Instead, with the upgrade to the working fire, and then the Mayday and a second alarm, Chief Ellert kept things very under control. Chief Smith arrived as well. Chief Ellert managed the Mayday. Chief Smith managed the firefighting operation. And I think, once again, as tragic of a day as it was a defining moment for us. And holding the line and keeping that incident under control.
I think it was a defining moment for most of us in the American Fire Service practicing command. I know it was a defining moment in Blue Card, because at that point, Blue Card was just launching and we had no 360s in the program. We weren't doing 360s. We weren't identifying basements at the time. And the Colerain incident definitely helped form our direction on including that in the curriculum and making it part of the initial size up and incident action plan. So, while these tragedies are so sad for everyone involved, we have learned a lot from that tragedy. And I think that continues on because every day we're teaching Blue Card, we're talking about 360s and identifying basements and what happens if you don't. So we appreciate the fact that, you all have shared that and helped us learn from it. In the aftermath of the incident, what happened, as far as the recovery and the department going forward from there? What are some of the changes that were made? And, hindsight, all the time is our friend and enemy. What did you learn and how did the department move forward from this?
So in short order, a committee was formed to begin the investigation process, along with the investigation by NIOSH. The day of the incident, April 4, 2008, I can recall sitting in Command 400, Mobile Command Unit, Hamilton County Fire Chiefs Association, and Chief Smith having a short meeting with some of us and, stating that he was forming an investigation committee. Chief Niehaus would be in charge of it, and that we were to, find the facts, pertaining to their deaths and then put forth recommendations to prevent that from happening again, if at all possible, both at Colerain and the fire service as a whole. And so within, I believe, 3 months, we had a preliminary report out. There were about 12 action items identified in the preliminary report. A year later, the NIOSH report came out, and then a smaller group of persons, which I was a part of, worked on the final report. which came out in 2010, which identified about 72 different items and had 52 or 53 recommendations. And so, training, operations, we set out on an arduous task of revisiting, reviewing, reflecting upon, things that happen, ways to address it. And quite frankly, even though that final report is almost going to be 12 years old, just a year ago, when we had a communications issue, that final report was used as a means to justify something that we needed to do as far as communications. And so it wasn't just a one and done report, here it is, and then we're done with it. We were looking at communications in our battalion chief vehicle and the best way to do that and to minimize distractions, and using a final report and pulling out a recommendation. It was, here's the justification. Here's the only justification I need to see that we get this done. And cost isn't going to be a prohibitive factor. And we can't identify something 10 years ago or 11 years ago and then suddenly say, well, it doesn't really matter now. So that investigation and report in and of itself, even to today, affords us an opportunity to use it. And I think that's how you honor a sacrifice of the magnitude that Robin and Brian paid. It's to continue to look back and address those things and keep making those changes when necessary and when possible.
Chief, we talk a lot about we should constantly be in a state of trying to fix ourselves. And I think you just, in other words, pretty much so said that it's really never over. We should always be looking for a better way. And when we do identify something, we shouldn't just, well, we identified it, but we really didn't do anything about it. And if we can't do something with it today, maybe we can do something about it later. So I think that's an important thing for people to hear, because far too often we look back and we honor people's losses, but we really aren't learning anything from it or doing anything different. Yeah,
I completely agree. And unfortunately, even though, Squirrelsnest was widely publicized, we had the preliminary report, we had the NOSH report, we had the final report. And even to this day, we're out doing presentations about what happened that day. And in fact, I'll be in Columbus here in another week to go over 3 basement fires that we've had in Colerain. We haven't found new ways for firefighters to fall into basements and die. Mm-hmm. They continue to fall in basements the same old way and perish. And so, change is difficult. I think that if there's 2 things that firefighters hate the most, it's change in the here and now. And so, it's just knowing that we shouldn't change for the sake of change, but when change is indicated, we have to find the ways and the means to do it, especially when it pertains to health and safety matters.
With the department in the aftermath of everything, what would you say were the biggest items, the biggest impact change-wise that you all made within your organization?
I think first and foremost, standard operating guidelines. Secondly, probably, refining our incident management and, command officer support. We upgraded our one alarm assignment. I'm trying to think off the top of my head. We added additional tick cameras. And so generally speaking, the things that we tried to do were, in support of incident management and or operations. Likewise, the importance of the 360 and well, some people may not know, the first 2 companies didn't get the 360 done because at the time there wasn't a policy or a procedure. It was basically a heuristic here, rule of thumb. If you got it, you got it. And if you didn't, you didn't. But the second due captain on Engine 109, who's now one of our battalion chiefs, did get a 360 done. And he made communication with the battalion chief, the incident commander, that basically stated, have Engine 102 pull out. Easier access at the rear of the structure. Conditions were changing at the front door. But at the point in time that happened was probably about the same time things were transpiring inside that resulted in the deaths of Robin and Brian. And so, there was a 360, but and it identified key factors, but what was taking place inside was underway.
You're a large combination fire department. How was the training accomplished with your part-time staff? Was your part-time staffing on the same level then as it is now, or did anything change with your staffing model from 2008 to today?
Generally speaking, there hasn't been a significant change. We just did add to our staffing, though. We added 3 additional crew people and moved our number from 33 to 34. The Affordable Care Act, unfortunately, good for those that need insurance, but from our combination system, it's been problematic as far as staffing with part-time employees and that 30-hour threshold. So our maximum is 34 now, our minimum is 25. As far as training goes, doesn't matter if you're full-time, part-time, everyone's trained to the same level, to the same degree. And basically, for the lack of a better way to put it, it sounds kind of cliche, every day is a training day. I believe that in respect to what we do, and I say this sometimes when people look at me like, what? 11,333 times last year was an opportunity to learn to do things better. The bulk of that is reinforcing the good. Some of that, though, is identifying what we could have done better and making changes in order to do so, and just not burying our heads in the sand and saying, oh, wow, we got lucky on that one. Or, who needs to change because we just do things the way that we've always done it. With incident responses, with the training that we have, I think we've always been able to stay out ahead of things, and when we identify things, get it addressed to the best that we could.
You mentioned communication being a big item. There was a couple of things that you did with communication in terms of policy and procedure, and then also technically with communication with the communication tools, radios.
Yeah. So one of the things that we did, and, unfortunately we've taken a little bit of a step back though. We added headsets and the portable radios for our apparatus operators. That is not the case now. And we're looking at the ways and the means to deal with that appropriately. Likewise, it's recognizing that, the radio system that we had at the time, 800 megahertz digital trunk system, was better than what we had, but it still has some inherent flaws that we have to be aware of because, looking through that incident, 43 times in 34 minutes, there were rejections on the fire ground channel. And most of those were from persons in the hazard zone or immediately adjacent to the hazard zone. And so that's problematic then, at times, it was asked, well, why didn't they call a Mayday? Well, if you're rejected half a dozen times while you're in the hazard zone and nobody knows it until you obtain information that points to that, then who knows? And I think, we've seen that be a factor in other incidents. And that's not to point fingers or throw shade at anybody in particular. It's just to say that we have to be, clear, concise, to the point, but we also have to understand that sometimes we can have face-to-face communication. Sometimes we can have radio-to-radio communication. Just because we have a portable radio in our hand and somebody's standing 10 feet away doesn't mean that we need to get on the portable radio. We can walk over and have a conversation. Putting all that together and using it to our best advantage. I mean, me personally, it's something that is a pet peeve of mine is, useless communication once the first line is stretched into the hazard zone. What we can't afford to have happen is those in the hazard zone get rejected because they can't get on the radio.
How has your command post changed since that incident?
Honestly, it's not. We have long since been an organization where the incident commander stayed in the vehicle. They don't get out and roam around. They assign sector or division officers as needed. And quite frankly, that's the way it's been, and it's going to be. It creates a sterile environment. It keeps them focused on the task at hand. likewise, if they need additional sector division officers, they can assign those. And, at Squirrelsnest, that was my first assignment. I got to the BC car and I was asked to get around back and give a report about what was going on back there. So, it's keeping your head in the game, not being distracted, having that environment that's conducive to communication, but then likewise having, sector division officers who can provide you those key things that you're missing in order to paint the rest of the picture.
You guys actually changed the way that you do your shift change because of all the overlapping shifts. Just let's talk about shift change just for a little bit and the kind of shift change that you expect as a fire chief to happen at your department now.
Yeah. So on April the 4th, 2008, we had two different starting times and ending times. Our career people started at 0700 and ended at 0730. Our part-time people started at 6 and ended at 6. So at the time that incident came in, we actually had a mixed crew. Robin was hanging over because her shift ended at 7:30, but the part-time people switched out at 6 a.m. So, Brian and the other firefighters had only been in the station for about 10 minutes. Robin was within an hour and 20 minutes of going home. So following that, we looked at starting times and we made starting times the same. So we backed up career and part-time people to 6 a.m., which just recently, though, for health and safety matters, and as a recommendation of our health and safety committee, we moved the starting time for everyone to 7 a.m. So everyone starts at the same time now. After Squirrelsnest, it was 6 a.m. As a recommendation of our health and safety committee, and looking at things like sleep deprivation, we've moved that starting time to 7 a.m. for everybody. As far as the shift starting, we don't start at 7. We're ready to go to work at 7. And that means having your gear out, SCBA check, make sure your portable radio works, and the passport on the companies are ready to go. Because, as we saw in Squirrelsnest, they were in the door 10 minutes and left on an incident and never came back. So it can happen at 10 minutes after the starting time. It can happen at 1 minute after the starting time. So to me, there's a difference between starting at 7 and being ready at 7.
I had a department that I worked with that our shift time was 7 o'clock. And unfortunately, some of the members had a mantra that said 6:59, I'm still on time. And we used to say, no, you're not. You can't walk through the fire station door with 60 seconds to prepare yourself for a 24-hour shift. That's just not practical.
I've kind of had the mantra that early is on time and on time is late.
Yep. Before we switch gears, is there anything else you'd want to share with people about the Squirrelsnest incident? The things that happened that day and the things that we learned are just as applicable today as they were then. And so even though we're coming up on, the 14-year anniversary, what happened that day and once again, the things that we learned are just as applicable today. So don't think that just because something happened 14 years ago doesn't mean that those lessons aren't still valuable and applicable. And so, for those persons that reach out and want to hear it, once again, it's humbling and a privilege, and serving as the the voice piece for those who can't speak anymore is something that's near and dear to me. And look up that report, have a look at it, and you just might find something that's going to change the way you do something today. Well, to switch gears, let's talk a little bit about Blue Card implementation at your department and how that's going.
I think that I don't want to sound like I'm bragging, or I think we do things great. Like any organization, we have our good moments and we could have our better moments. I think that the way that we did it has lended itself to, the organization embracing it and adopting it. And by that, what I mean is, I guess in the fall of 2016, I became the operations chief. 17 was kind of a year of exploring some things and figuring some things out. And then in 18, with the help of one of our captains, Grant Burns, we began, I guess, what I would call a blue card light implementation. So we switched to, the on-deck philosophy. We started to develop a standard operating guideline that had a lot of the same terminology. And we had some growing pains, and I'm not going to say we didn't. But over the course of the next couple of years, then we were able to kind of refine that, get used to it. And then with the formalized adoption of Blue Card, I think it set us up for success. It'll be a year now in May. And quite frankly, I think things are going well. There's always things that you look at and say, we could have done that a little bit better. Or there's things that you look at and say, yeah, we did that really well. I suppose, unfortunately, sometimes to a fault, maybe I'm too much of a perfectionist. I think good can be great and great can be better. I can listen to initial radio reports and know when it's muscle memory. I can listen to initial radio reports and go, that's not quite muscle memory. But, we all learn at different speeds. And, quite frankly, once again, what it boils down to is just practice, practice, practice. We don't practice to get it right. We practice to make sure that we don't get it wrong. So, and that's not my quote.
As far as how's Colerain Township making sure that you guys are staying on track, not just with Blue Card, but like when you go to fires or other events, are you guys reviewing those or talking about that? Like, what can we do better? Yeah.
So if you look at our after action review policy, we have what we call a bumper huddle, where at the incident, there'll be a discussion for more complex incidents. We have a formalized after action review that we'll look at. And that's one of the things that we, used to our advantage, I believe, in that 18 to 21 time frame. It was anytime an inch 3/4 line came off and was used in the extinction of a fire, we did an after action review. We listened to radio traffic. We looked at our SOG. Did we need to tweak anything? And once again, I think, that progression is what built us up to, the point to where we're at now, to where we didn't come in one day and just say, here you go, and this is what we're going to do. Some of that was already built in over that 3 years, I guess you could say, of kind of just planting the seeds so that we would grow a good crop of corn.
With the every day is a training day philosophy that you used, talk to us a little bit about how you implement that, especially with a combination department.
So generally, looking at our training calendar, it's up on Fire Manager, and it's left up to our training captain, generally speaking, as well as those who are on shift and a part of that training committee. Just looking ahead, this month we're into our MSA G1 phase 1, 2, and 3 shift drills. That's Monday through Saturday. Towards the end of the month here, we're into CPR renewal. And so basically every month then, and every day other than Sunday, which sometimes is a catch-up day, is that training day. Looking ahead to March here, we've got ground ladder carries and raises, Blue Card managing the Mayday. We'll see Josh there. Our technical rescue team's got rope rescue planned. So it's very, comprehensive. We try to meet the needs of everyone because, I guess you could say we're a full service training department. So, here in the state of Ohio, we're a CE training site as far as EMS goes. We also do pediatric advanced life support, advanced cardiac life support, and basic life support. We have the instructors to do those things on the fire side. We're a chartered fire department, so we can do initial training. So we actually have our own recruit classes. We can teach initial training programs, and then we have our own shift training. So, in essence, as a training department, we're kind of a one-stop shop, for the lack of a better way to put it. We're actually, getting our paramedic refresher in right now as well. So, be it EMS or fire, we can just about cover all the bases, and we can go from the basics to the more advanced things. Say, for instance, with our technical rescue team, and the rope rescue practicals here in the end of March.
Recent times, we've used some radio traffic from some working incidents in Colerain Township, and I think you said it, muscle memory thing, but there's also some thinking, that comes out in that. And we like talking a lot about creating thinking firefighters, thinking company officers, thinking chief officers, not just one size fits all, or it says this, so this is what you have to do. It's more of, we teach somebody a process to make some decisions. So when you're listening to your incidents inside of your organization, are you hearing and then kind of seeing that people are making some good decisions and people are actually doing things to solve the problem instead of just doing something just because that's what we do?
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that, because I have a pretty simple philosophy. It's make decisions, use discretion, and apply common sense. And, that's what we want our company officers and battalion chiefs to do. It's make decisions. If it's not the best decision, we can learn to make better decisions from it. If it's not the best discretion, well, we can learn to use better discretion. Common sense, I don't know. We've got to figure that one out. Sometimes, unfortunately, common sense isn't so common, but we don't deal with that a lot. But, I guess the best way to put it is, show me a person who's never been criticized, and I'll show you a person who's never made a decision.
Yep.
So I'm about, make decisions and solve the problem. I tell people, and I mean it with the utmost, I don't know what word I want to use. I describe myself as the least important person at the Colerain Fire Department, but the most responsible. I doubt anybody's going to call me today and ask me how to throw a ladder, or they're going to call me today and ask me how to start an IV. I could tell them both, but nobody's going to do that. But if something doesn't go well in an incident, well, the buck stops here, and that's with me. So I'm all about make decisions, and sometimes we do that well. Sometimes we could do it better, but that's how you learn. You make decisions, and we learn from it.
Yeah, and I think that circles back around then too to that that tailboard critique and the follow up to the incident, and what did we do really good, and what can we do better, and really that operant conditioning thing, right? You did that really well, but when you don't do something so well, we're going to talk to you about it, and you might be a little uncomfortable about it, so you don't do it again. And then sharing that amongst your entire organization, which working in the region of your fire department, it seems like that happens too. If something happened on one shift and we can learn something from it, we need to share it amongst everybody so we don't make that same mistake again. It's an opportunity to do better.
Yeah, I don't think that there should be any secrets. Now, I will say, I'll just harken back to Squirrelsnest for a minute. That investigation was hard on the department. I'm not going to say otherwise. When you're pointing out things that you could have done better, that's sometimes lines get drawn, but you can't allow that to hinder or hamper the ability to improve. And so, when a company goes back to the fire station and they could have done something better, talk about it and tell people, and let's let everybody learn from it so that we don't repeat it again with more tragic circumstances. So I think at times, and once again, it's not my quote. I saw it and used it in a class here a week or two ago. Unfortunately, sometimes pride is our greatest enemy. Humility can be our greatest friend. So sometimes it's just having the ability to say, you know what? I could have done that better. And then we all learn from it. I respect people who aren't afraid to say, could have done that one better. And then we all learn from it, as opposed to, somebody dig their heels in because they've never made a mistake. And I would say that I could show you a person then who isn't being honest with themselves.
Chief, do you have anything else you want to leave us with before we say goodbye?
No, once again, I want to give respect and homage to Chief Smith, who was the fire chief for a number of years, who, is admittedly a disciple or was of Chief Brincini, and years ago started that process of managing incidents, with an organized system that Chief Brunicini had basically, promulgated. And through the years then, continuing to utilize that. And now with Blue Card, I think the influence of Chief Brunicini is significant on incident management in Colerain Township. And that's, influence like that is immeasurable. Even though we had the tragedy that we had, what we had, learned and how we had dealt with incidents kept that from becoming, an even worse incident. So all of you out there teaching us how to do it right, we thank you. We appreciate it.
Well, we thank you, and thank you for sharing and for talking to us about this incident and what you're doing right now at the Colerain Township Fire Department. Thanks for your time today.
Thank you very much.
We're going to shuffle the deck, Timeless Tactical Truths, and these are from Alan Brunicini. And we've got a card deck here that we pull up, the Six of Hearts. Like that matters, right? Like we're playing solitaire. All right, Six of Hearts. Command should be transferred prior to the current IC becoming overwhelmed. What does that look like, the current IC being overwhelmed?
So really, the incident commander can get there in most cases and give initial radio report, a follow-up report, and say what they're going to do and probably assign a couple of companies. But once they break that threshold and go inside, we're approaching probably that 3-minute mark. I don't know. Within 5 to 7 minutes, we should have a strategic IC pulling up that's ready to transfer command if the fire's not going out and things aren't going well, if it's continuing to escalate. So, that's what it means. The initial IC on that first company can get there and do size up +3, really, what they're going to do and what a couple more companies are going to do. And beyond that, from inside the building, they can't do much else. They can give assignments, but they really can't orchestrate or manage what those companies are doing.
The way I make sense out of it, in most fire departments, the first one to get there is an engine company. Person taking command is the officer of that engine. Like Josh said, they've got about 5 to 7 minutes. They're going to give you an initial radio report that becomes the IAP with the strategy, and then they're going to assign the next few units, up to the next 4 total. I like to view that as the initial operation, because we got there initially. It's a task level operation. There's no strategic or tactical bosses. It's all task level supervisors. And what you're doing is you're establishing a level of command that those first 3 or 4 companies fit into, that you can manage the position and function. All that goes out over the radio. That has to be reinforced with another person responding to the scene that is tracking those assignments. Once they get there, they make the decision whether to transfer it or leave it with the. So and the system I'm from, that would be the first NBC would make that decision. And then if they take it, then now you have a strategic positioned IC who is not being assaulted by what's going on in the hazard zone. So it makes it gets you the quickest from, okay, we're going to take effective action in the beginning. That's going to solve the problem in the majority of cases. And it does. The NFPA statistics say still 300 gallons of water, one line puts out most fires in America today. If that's the case, the fire goes out, you don't need to jack command up anymore, because now you're dealing with a decreasing hazard and you got more time and the rest of it. If it doesn't, it's a huge firefighter safety requirement that you move command outside of that hazard zone now. I've got 3 or 4 units that are actively participating in a hazardous operation. Now I got a strategic level of command who's actually running it, and that becomes a reinforced operation. So what they are doing is they're reinforcing now the strategic level to what you've got going on with that first group. So they would keep doing that. And now in my system, that person came with a partner. So you had a BC and a safety officer essentially in the front seat of that BC rig. Most places don't have that. It's going to be a single officer that responds. But that's still better than having to wear all your stuff and being screaming in a portable radio inside a burning building. Still got a reinforced level of command. And then what we do is we assemble a command team around that person with a support officer, a senior advisor, and whatever section positions. Well, that usually involves getting into a bigger command post. I look at that as an escalated operation. So now I've got everybody in the command post that can manage whatever that hazard is outside with the people. Those tend to be defensive operations because it takes most fire departments 20 to 30 minutes to assemble that many strategic level officers to build that kind of a command post. The fires that burn 30 minutes tend to consume the whole building and the one next to it and the one behind it. And you got a bigger level of command, you got a bigger fire, and you got more resources. So that's the way we match command without getting overwhelmed.
We'd like to thank Fire Chief Alan Walls for joining us and sharing his department's experiences on this B-Shifter. If you've got something out of this podcast and you haven't already done so, please subscribe. Please leave a review if you can and tell your colleagues about us. Until next time, thanks so much for listening to B-Shifter.